Welcome back to another episode of More People, More Problems with Chelsea and myself, Brittany. We're here to chat about a fun one today about references and kind of the bullshit meter. So we'll see about that. But before I pass it to the beautiful Chelsea, their new hairdo, I just want to say, listen, like, enjoy. Obviously, everything we talk about is confidential and anonymous, unless it's about ourselves. Then you're going to get all the goods. But I hope you enjoy today's episode. And Chels, I'm going to pass it to you because I feel like you know a lot more on this topic than I do.
Well, I highly doubt that, but thank you anyways, and appreciate the comment about the hair. Well, I'll dig into that a little bit with you on wine time after when we have some time to gab on it. Okay, reference checks, background checks, referrals. We're going to talk about those things today, but I want to start out with a little story about how I almost never got into the government because of a reference check. And no, I mean, I don't think it's because I'm a crap employee and whatever, but for those of you who are in the federal public service, you know currently the way reference checks are kind of laid out
Okay, and for
are.
us that aren't, like, I have no idea.
Oh, okay. So it's very rigorous selection of employees in the public service to ensure fairness and transparency. And you have to outline in a job advertisement exactly what you're going to assess a candidate on. So, i.e., the competencies or the abilities, the suitabilities. So, you'll do certain things within the screening process. You'll do certain things within an interview. Maybe you have tests as well. And then references as well, unless it's a right fit reference. But if you're assessing someone on a reference, like various competencies, I don't know, judgment, things like that, client service, you'll have specific questions, you'll have the definitions of those competencies. And most selection boards are looking for the referee to provide a description of how the individual, the candidate meets that competency and provide concrete examples. Okay, like not just like
So
yes, they
specific. Like
super
when you just
specific.
think about a reference check, it's like, oh, I'm calling someone to, probably validate some facts, but more so to get a feel for their personality and like, instincts, red flags. Whereas this is a very extreme. Like they're looking for specific things, if I hear you correct.
They're looking for really specific things and they're looking for you to really elaborate in your concrete examples like where did this happen? When did it happen? How long for? What was the I don't know, the situation? What was the actions that were taken? What were the results? Okay,
Sounds like
so
an
that's
interrogation.
it's like an interrogation, but even for someone who's not used to Government of Canada selection processes, either as an applicant, yeah, or as a referee, you can easily F this up
Oh
and not
yeah.
get a job, right? So, I mean, it was my first job or my first kind of set of applications into the government, and I was making it away along in the process, go to references. Like, this is looking good. This is in the bag,
You're like, I'm gonna get hired. Let's
I'm,
go.
I'm getting hired. References are easy peasy, obviously. Um,
I
I'm
feel like I
great
might have
now.
been a side note, I might have been one of your references at this time.
I feel like you were one. I mean, you might have been actually because we had worked at Canadian Diabetes Association
I
together.
just
So
feel
it's
like I might have
possible.
been like a personal reference too. Maybe I'm thinking of the passport. I don't
No,
know, but I've been a reference for you.
definitely on like security checks and stuff like
Okay,
that.
okay, okay.
I've had you as a reference, like a character attestation, and know you know
Yes,
me. I'm
yes.
not
Okay, that's
claiming.
what I'm thinking of.
We'll get into that stuff later. But anyways, okay, references, specific set of questions. Say there's like four different competencies. Obviously, my former employer before I was in the government of Canada, private sector, I was working in retirement homes. I gave her as she was my manager, my supervisor, gave her as my referee. And she filled in the reference check to the best of her abilities. But of course, when you are forced to respond to a certain like within a certain assessment criteria, so description, concrete example, all the details and what they're looking for, it's really easy to hit the mark, not because and for that to be impacted on the actual candidate, not because they received a bad reference, but just because you didn't answer in the way that they're looking for you to answer. You didn't elaborate on your examples,
How
they
fucked up
were
is that though? Like you almost have to, it's like, I don't know, it's like a game, like it's like a puzzle. Like you need to make sure you
It
hit on the
is.
right words so it's checked off. It's such a machine robotic way of doing things because there's no ability to expand unless I'm getting it wrong.
No, I mean there is ability to expand, but I'll tell you why, and then I'll get in after when we dig into this more on what I think is a better way to do this in the
Okay.
government in another selection process that I'm a board member on right now. But also think about how many candidates apply for an administrative position in the government. It gets posted across like
Yeah.
publicly, and say for an administrative position, an AS1 for anyone who knows in the government that classification level, you could get 600 people applying on that. You could get 1,000 people applying on that. So you need to be able to screen people out in the screening
Yeah. I
and
get
then the
that at the
interview
beginning, but like
and references. That
how many reference checks are they doing? Like at that stage, is it 2? Is it
I mean, no, no, no. Usually, oh, per candidate, you mean?
like per role? So if it's this like administrative role, like the one you ended up getting hired, so teaser, she did get in, even though the reference check almost bailed you out of the process. How many reference checks were they doing within that you got the job for?
Could be hundreds, but
What?
here let me clarify another thing for you, Britt. When you most of the time, oftentimes when you apply on a process in the government, it's not for one specific job. It's
Yeah,
to
okay.
be included in a pool of qualified candidates to staff could be 40 jobs at that group and level. So, for example, like you're not necessarily talking directly to the hiring manager in this until you kind of get up pretty high, which is possible. But most of the time in the government, we have a
They're just
load
getting you
of
into a
jobs.
pool. So you're vetted and you're ready to be hired and all the work. So it's all done
Yes,
by HR and scaling processes to be like, okay, Chelsea's now in this pool. So she's been vetted, but that doesn't mean she has a job. It just means you've met all the criteria.
a hiring manager could then look at the entire pool of qualified candidates and go, okay, they're all meeting all the competencies. I'm
Yeah.
going to interview, or I'm going to do a right fit interview for five of these that seem to have some of the assets that I'm looking for. And then I'm going to make a decision. But references will have already made, um, will have been encompassed in the actual vetting process
Yeah. It's
because
like
they're
a sourcing exercise on steroids because it's so scaled out. But it like they've upped like let's say at Shopify, we would source people and we would create a sourcing net like a pool of candidates. But that was all prior to who we even brought into interview. And honestly, we did introduce reference checks later on because Anna convinced me, and I was so against it. And I'm still against it because I think that 90% of the time, it's kind of bullshit. Like I would say it's bullshit. 10% you get something really valuable in there, but the amount of time and effort you put in, is it worth it? Like, is that a valuable exercise for that 10%? I mean, you could argue yes. I would argue no, but I think there's a difference between reference checks and background checks and referrals. I think
yeah.
referrals and background checks extremely valuable. I think reference checks, like you don't know who you're selecting. I've gotten reference checks where I've gone to do it and it's like someone has selected their neighbor and said they've worked like it could just be such bullshit. And there's
You're
so
right.
many flaws in it. Anyways, I'm going to digress because I can go off.
Lots of flaws, and you're right. And then I'll take it to the lens of the government for a second.
Yeah.
A reference check to qualify a candidate, i.e. based on competencies, versus a reference check in terms of a right fit for a role. And I'll talk about that after, because for one, the first one really really difficult, oh, very time consuming, and you could fail that just based on your referee not taking the time, not understanding the questions properly, not responding in the way that we're looking for. You could fail that, and that sucks, and you can lose a lot of
But you
candidates.
almost did.
I almost
Your
did.
life would be
Almost did.
drastically changed.
My life could have been very much different, and because the other interesting thing is when you do a reference check to qualify a candidate into a pool, you get all your results afterwards too, right? So I received my results for my reference check, and I say I had two or three referees at that point, and say they were assessing based on two or three competencies. So it's usually a scaled response, like out of five. And so some of them I had, and your pass mark is typically three, right, on each
Yeah.
competency. A lot of them, like for this particular individual who gave me the reference, I was like on the 3 out of 5 mark. And I went back and looked at the responses, and then versus someone else who clearly had really delineated their answers, who was in the government, who understood,
Understood
where
the
it was
assignment.
getting where it was getting mostly all understood the assignment, where it was
Yeah.
getting mostly all fives and like a four here and there. And the other one, I was like, oh my god, I almost like failed this. It like looks like I'm a shit candidate.
I have to admit that if you did make me a reference at this point, or
I
if
would fail.
anyone asked me in the past and it was a government related role and I didn't understand the assignment, I can tell you I didn't until this moment, I would have fucked you over. Like, I don't think I would have been as descriptive around examples
Mm,
and around specific, let's say adjectives or descriptors of those skills as I would be knowing this context. So, like,
yeah,
when they send out reference checks, I think there needs to be a little disclaimer at the top, like, please read thoroughly, please give examples, please da da da, because
yeah.
it's not
I
very
mean,
nice.
no, and there always is. So there, all
Okay.
that information is always provided, the definition of the competencies, even like for example, and I'll get into one after, what we're doing on a different process, which is a candidate achievement record. So for example, the
And that's just
candidate,
factual timeline.
well, the candidate, it responds to the questions based on experience, and they want you to do that star method oftentimes, right? It's the situation, the task, the actions, what were the results. So the candidate is actually responsible for doing that. And then if it's deemed appropriate or meeting, the assessment criteria that's been laid out, it then gets sent to the referee to validate that information. Yes, this is true. Yes, this all happened. Yes, this is factual, and I'm signing my name to it. I like that method because
Has anyone ever said, no, this isn't factual?
I'm about to find out. It's the first time I've
Okay.
ever been on a board where
I'm
we used
curious
it.
if, like, I know within Ottawa and Ontario that it's really hard as a referee to give a reference check, because if you are negative or sometimes too truthful, it can be considered slander. And so you
Mhm.
have to be careful. And this is one of my issues with reference check. And I feel like if it's a factual representation of timeline, you should be able to say yes or no, this isn't true, based on my recount, this never happened, or etc. So I like that method.
Yep.
I think the most factual you can be, that's where you get the most truth and accuracy and like see flags. I think when it gets more personal, and a great one is, okay, we're going to assess fit or cultural fit, and then it gets so subjective. And within that, someone will ask, like, did you get along with Chelsea when she worked for you? And you're like, what am I going to say here? Like, no. I mean, obviously, if she worked with me for 5 years, we had some good times, but like, no, actually, if this
Mm.
happened, she was a total bitch. Like, you can't say that. There's slander. And so I just feel like it can be such fluff.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that. But this star accuracy, I'm curious to hear how it goes, because I think the factual aspect could be really good.
I like it because it allows the individual to elaborate on their experience on having met that competency. They're responsible for
Yeah.
the details, the examples, what happened, who was involved, and then they have to provide the name of an individual who was likely one of their superiors, one of their supervisors or managers who can validate. Now the validator can either say, so we determine, yeah, that response that meets for us, like we feel good about it. Now let's check if it's actually true. Now we're going to go to your validator and they can say yes or no, it's valid, and they can provide comments as well. So if someone were to say no, it's not valid, there's a section where they'll indicate, for example, this person said that they led this task force and it lasted 1 year and they were the main star. As it turns out, they were not. They were just a member of a task force. They were not, like, we're looking for that type of stuff, right?
You know
So
what I would love about this? I'd feel like we said earlier, like a fucking detective. I'd be like, oh yeah. And then if someone said no, I would get so excited. I'd be like, Chelsea, you lied. And like, I don't know if you can go back and do that, but it sounds so like it really is more detective. I feel like question with this method, is it all written or are you having a call or a video to do it? Because sometimes
All
so
written.
much of it is the nuance of reading someone's expression. Like they're like, well, I guess they did, but you're like, okay, no, there's something more. Let me dig. Like, what was their role? Much time? And so, what's the medium in which you do it?
This is all written out.
Oh,
So
I don't love
obviously
that
it
as much.
first goes to the candidate. They do all the responses. We deem if it
Yeah.
fits the criteria. And then we are the ones who personally send it out to the validator and go like, tell us if this is true. And it's like you complete the little slip at the bottom after they've put in all
Yeah.
this information. And then we assess based on that. Now it doesn't mean, and this is to qualify someone, right? I'm
Yeah.
saying you're qualified. You could be hired for any job at this group and level. It doesn't preclude a hiring manager from doing a right fit discussion, right fit interview. Yeah, I mean, if I knew someone and I knew their references, I'm almost always going to call their former managers and like, so give me the real scoop. Like, tell me.
Yeah, but I mean, how many times are they going to? That's my issue. Like, okay, so I'm going to jump in with some thoughts, and this is more private sector. But actually, like, I have many more thoughts on the public because I feel like it's too granular that it doesn't allow any nuance to explore certain things. But I get why they're doing it. Once again, scale, inclusion, equitable. Like, I totally get why. I just feel like in some aspects there has to be a better way, but I'm not there. I'm not doing it, so who knows? Within the private sector, though, like for the first 9 years at Shopify, we never did reference checks because we started doing them and they just became such a waste of time because it was like whatever candidate just chose the people that they knew was going to be the best, that would always give them a pat on the back. It was just like a fluff piece. And I was like, this is bullshit. Like, what I want to know is the goods. And so, what we ended up doing was, backdooring, like actually, if it was someone senior coming in and we knew the company, we would reach out to someone that we knew worked with them to ask, hey, real talk, how was it? And I guess that could be considered a reference check, but it wasn't given by the employee. So I don't like, or by the candidate, it was usually really what we're trying to do. And I think this is my understanding of how reference checks emerged in history is psychologically as humans, we want to understand from another person's perspective how this person did to give us like social proof, to give us confidence and trust in the candidate. Because in the interview process, it's very risky. It's like dating. You're starting to meet someone, you're starting to get to know them, but everyone's putting on their best face. Everyone's giving you
Of course.
the amazingness of themselves and they're hiding anything shitty. We
Oh,
all do it. And so it's kind of like dating. If you're going to meet someone, what do? You check on your Instagram and socials. Who
yeah,
do they
you're
know in
frequent.
common? Like how do you get any feedback outside of who you're actually going on a date with? I mean, this is why certain apps, dating apps, are so powerful, like Hinge. It would show you who you were connected with so you could message. It's that social proofing to know. And so I think, a lot of times when we bring that into the business world and we're talking about reference checks, you're trying to do that to get that same validation, but
Mhm.
it's flawed because most of the time in reference checks, they're complete strangers. There's no connection. There's no
Yeah.
shame or feel a need of honesty and truth because you have a connection with that third, like that connecting party. And so I think if you do, then a reference check goes from like, 5% valuable to like 99% because there's social impact that is accrued through that. And so referrals are good because of that social
I love
trust
her.
and impact. I think reference checks, if you get the right person and you actually have a connection. Otherwise, I think there's very little value to them. And I know that people are going to disagree, but that's my thought.
No, I don't disagree, but there are like it's just exactly what we said, going and reaching out to a company. I get messages and calls all the time saying so and so has applied to my job. I see, like, I know you worked in that team, or you're in HR. Do you know this person? I get it all the time. And I find those are always for me the most valuable ones. I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
But
you've
they're
got
off the
whatever.
book. They're
What's
not,
that?
I said they're off the book. It's like
They're
going back to
completely off
this
the book.
like detective.
Tell me more.
analogy. It's like it's off the book. Like, can you actually use it? Like, it does infer to the way you think about it. But if someone messages you and they're like, I know you worked on this team where I know you had awareness to Joe, and you're like, actually, Joe sucked. He not
Yeah.
only was he not really skilled, he's kind of an asshole. That hiring manager, the qualifier, how do they put that in action in the government? Because everything is so documented. Like, how does that play into it? In the
Well,
private sector, you just write, like, we have a conversation and we're like, okay, we got this source. This is a new piece of information. It's going to then, you know, impact our decision. But in the government, can you do that?
so that type of reference, like it's either off the books completely or it's a right fit reference, right? So that manager can decide not to hire that person. They can decide to go and talk to seven other people who had qualified in the pool and go, yep, no need. Like you might be qualified, doesn't mean you have a job, but it means you're
Yeah.
qualified for a job, and you might get a job out of it, or the pool might expire in a year and no one's hired you, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
Flags, obviously, when people make it all through a selection process with all these competencies, but the little whisper in the ear is, that's a horrible person, you should never hire that person, and they're going to cause you loads of problems. But there's always going to be flaws in
Yeah, and I
selection
don't think you should take
processes,
one person's neg like, someone
for
calls me and
sure.
I actually was saying, "Joe sucks, da, da, da." Take it with a great, like, I am
Someone
one
else may say
perspective.
he's
That's
great.
to dig more, but it shouldn't confirm the decision, like, maybe
Totally
I'm an
different.
asshole.
Maybe, yeah, maybe you have biases that,
Yeah.
or need to be checked possibly, and maybe they need to go and dig some more. But I mean, yeah, I've for sure received emails, calls like, I know you used to work with this person, what are your thoughts? And I'll give my honest truth to that person. Excellent worker, really great, shows up on time. I've also given my honest truth of, you don't want to touch this person with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
If you value, your team and the
Team
culture on your
cohesion.
team. Yeah, and if you want to have like a fully productive team and someone who's not going to kind of toxify your environment. I have done that, and I think that that's important. Now we have to be truthful when we give references, and for that person to go just based on that, not correct. And I always say to people, you probably want to gather a few more sources. That's my
Yeah.
opinion of that individual. It's subjective, but there've of course been situations I have to be truthful, and I want to ensure that, I'm in the government of Canada, massive employer obviously for Canadians. You want to ensure that all your colleagues are getting the best individuals, over
Yeah.
and above, beyond just trying to get rid of them. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I know, and that goes back to other conversations around, like, poor performers are gonna sometimes be like, you might get a positive review or reference check for poor performer because another manager just wants to get rid of them. That's shitty. That's hopefully the outliers and not the norm. But you do have
That-
to. That's why you get a sourced group of it. I
yes.
think ultimately, I think that from my experience, there may have been out of the thousands and thousands of hires, it's like there may have been like a handful where when we do a red reference check, I don't even know of a handful, but that we've pulled out. I do not like, I can't even think of one example myself of all the senior hires and people that I've hired for my team that we've ever pulled out once doing a reference check. The one thing we've gotten, and I think this was to Doug Tetzner, who was on my team. Shout out to you, Doug. He made it reframe and he said, a reference check, stop thinking about it as looking for red flags like you're not going to hire and start thinking of it as information to how you're going to manage this person better. So
Oh,
he's like,
that's
I asked questions about, how did you like ensure that Chelsea was thriving? Like, what's the environment that makes her most successful?
love it.
What are her strengths and where are things that we can work on? And it was framed in a way to make the referral referee, as you called it, be more open to be like, oh, I'm helping to set this person up for success and provide insights that actually then would be valuable. And I did get some good stuff in there. And actually, I didn't feel like it was a waste of time as much because I was like, okay, this is like recon to then make me expedite the onboarding in our relationship. But it wasn't seeking red flags to not move the candidate forward. And usually, though, I will say it's because we were so far into it that we had met them 6 times. Like if someone was like what, like they, I don't know. I just felt like it maybe enough insight was done or
You feel like
discovery that,
you'd had enough materials on your own to judge their
yeah,
character, to not anticipate that there would be some deep dark secrets that would be
exactly.
revealed, and you decided that you weren't going to go digging for just whatever, because that's fruitless, right? Go find the needle
Yeah.
in the haystack most of the time. If you've
Yeah.
met with someone that many times, you've reviewed their CV, you've looked into the companies, you've done background checks, maybe they were referred from someone else, like, maybe you shouldn't go looking for that. Maybe you should look at the facilitation part of it. Like you said, let's help with their onboarding. How are we going to develop them? How am I going to manage them? Coming
Yeah.
from their former manager, this is what they say is works best for them. This is where they thrive. This is where they're strong at. So I think that's a really cool idea to reframe. And it depends how many candidates you have at that point that you're looking into. Like if I'm saying, oh, we've got 100, I'm like, shite, I'm not going to have time to do that. Like,
Yeah, well, that's like a whole different way because I didn't realize when you said referral, like reference checks in the government, it was so early in a pool. I assumed wrongly that it was kind of like our private sector process, which is it's the final stop gate before you make an offer,
yeah,
and you just aren't doing that many. So it's a completely different process. Um,
different.
and like
And
for you,
it
you're
can be
looking for just more data and validation.
more data, more validation, and it can be done in different types of ways. Like I said, to qualify versus to right fit someone, but most of the time it's often using as a qualifier, so based on competencies. But
Just make sure
uh,
you know if you ever get asked for a reference check for a friend or a colleague or a boss that's going into the government, use descriptors, use examples,
you got
use
to
the
be
words that
prepared.
are in the question.
And first off, like just as a tip out there for anyone, like for any references, but also especially for the government, if someone asks you to be a reference for them, take that role seriously. It's going to take it, and it will take you a good amount of time. It's not like this was a great candidate and
This
I
is what
highly
I
recommend
hate already.
and they have a lot of initiative. It is going in most
Don't ask
traditional
me,
roles.
friends and
Don't
colleagues.
ask
Don't. I
Brittany,
don't
she's
want to
not
do it.
going to do it. First off, you have to believe as a referee that you feel confident giving this person a reference, that you can attest to their experiences, their abilities. You can recall general dates, general examples that you can put in there. And you're going, stop, Brittany, stop
I
before
know.
you
I have a
jump in.
thought. I have a question for you though.
Go,
So,
go.
do you think in that context of like say no if you don't have anything good to say, shut your mouth, our moms taught us that. Do you think when a candidate comes in and their past boss supervisor isn't a reference, is that a red flag in itself?
Yep.
So what do
Yeah.
you do with that?
But, okay, typically in the government, oftentimes in the processes I've been in, whenever I've been leading a process, I say it has to be we need two references. For example, it has to be your current supervisor and it has to be your former supervisor. um, because a lot of people, and you can look into that. I can look on certain directories in the government of Canada and see if those people are managers, or I could probably look them up
I
on
mean,
Facebook and
LinkedIn nowadays, you really can do a lot of research and
see
to
if they're your
validate.
neighbor. I could see if they're your family member, with a different last name. But yeah, that would be a red flag to me. But I do understand that there are scenarios where some things don't always work out, and it gets hoisted onto the candidate and potentially feels like it's in a bad light. But if someone is in two situations for their references where they don't have a good justification for why they were unable to give their current and or former, or someone who covered for their manager at least for a 4-month period of time, who can
Yeah.
attest to their skills and abilities, it is going to be a red flag, and they need to actually submit a justification as to why they were not able to do that.
Yeah, I'm looking at reference checks in a whole new way through this conversation, like I'm a detective and I'm going to find the truth. And it's more fun when you think about it this way. But the reality is like it's a lot of work and time.
It's a lot
Like
of
you
work.
just said, to give a reference for someone, but also to be within talent or to be the hiring manager and to actually go do it. And so I think you have to go into it with the right intentions. Like you said, are you going to validate facts? Are you going to get an inside scoop on the personality and how they show up? Like,
Yep,
what are you trying to
absolutely.
do? And then who are you reaching out to and how are you setting up that conversation? When I say
Exactly.
reframe it about how are they going to be successful, like how to make it successful, it's a sneaky way of also finding out information that maybe you wouldn't get when you ask a direct question. So I also like that aspect of it. But I think that if you know you're going to hire someone and no matter what your reference checks say about them, you're like, no, I'm sold. Like, there's no point. Just go for it. Like,
Yeah.
I think you just got to be real with yourself too. And I think it's obviously very different in the private versus public. But
And as a potential referee for someone, do not be afraid to say no to someone.
yeah,
Now, I've said
yeah,
no a couple of times this past year to individuals from former teams who actually were not direct reporting to me. And I said, no, I'm sorry. I will not be able to attest to all the things that you're likely looking for in a reference check. You'll have to go to your direct supervisor. I mean, it doesn't matter if I love you and I think you're amazing. It's your direct supervisor who managed you, who
yeah,
can attest to the examples. And I've also said no because in my heart of hearts, I've said I don't have enough to say that is positive, that isn't going to be
do you
slandered.
say that to someone?
No,
Okay, I
I'll
was like,
just,
but I was also proud of you if you did. That's
I
an
mean,
awkward conversation, but it's also real. It's like, I don't think you want me to be your reference check.
I
I will
I
not sell you.
I've said things to individuals in terms of I don't think I'll be able to attest to the competencies that that are going to be involved. I don't think that, I'm
Yeah.
necessarily the right person. I've never really been approached, I'll be honest, at this point yet. I don't recall ever having been approached by someone, and maybe they're just smart, whom clearly I would not provide a reference for. So, I mean, I've had people approach me and kind of skip their supervisor and go, "Oh, Chelsea will do it for me." And I said, "Sorry, I won't be able to do that." And it's not
Yeah,
because
doesn't make
you're
sense.
not fantastic and I don't think you're suitable for the job, but I'm not the person who's going to be able to elaborate on that for you. And also have to look at my own time as well. How much
Yeah.
time is it going to take me to do that for you and to stretch? And no, I shouldn't have to consult five people to get your examples. You need to go to the right person and ask
Yeah.
for reference, and don't
Yeah,
take
it's fair.
so.
Do you wanna quickly just talk about background checks? I gotta
I know there's just so much stuff you could talk about on this. Background checks. Obviously, a lot of people know the background checks. You can be looking at criminal history, you can be looking at credit checks, especially people who are going to work in banks,
and, like, just to be fair, we did background checks for certain roles, that were, like, security, access to
social
specific
media,
information. For SOX compliance as a public company, it's
for sure.
mandatory that you do, but there's also, reasons, like you just said, access to information that you wanna make sure that you're bringing in someone that doesn't have a track record of anything illegal.
I
And
mean,
so, but mine was very like my view of it was very cut and dry of a legal record. And what you're going to talk about right now, because I find it so interesting, is an expanded view of that that's necessary, but just kind of different than what I ever thought.
yeah, I mean, background checks, like I said, you can a lot of the time in various government of Canada departments, organizations, or agencies, you'll have a security clearance process. Now, involved in a security clearance process, depending on the level, can be fairly straightforward. You're looking a little bit at your travel history. They might do a criminal record check. Could even go up to doing credit checks. Now, when you start to go into roles or organizations where you're really going to be handling sensitive, classified, highly protected information, this can get intense. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, most of the time, most people are going to do social media sweeps. Like, guys, keep your shit like together on your social media. Obviously, if you're talking that you just like, did something illegal on social media, you're probably not going to get a job because most
Don't
everyone's
be
going to,
dumb dumb.
yeah, everyone's going to check your Facebook and Instagram. So like just FYI on that. That's just basic like, smartness. Um, but anyways, you go up in those organizations, you need a very high level of clearance. So they're probably doing criminal record checks, credit checks. Really
Right.
can't I can't elaborate on this a lot because you're not actually allowed to talk about the types of of
Ah,
things that are getting asked in these interviews, in these sweeps and everything. But they'll really dig in. Like they really need to dig in on your life,
I'm
on your.
assuming, maybe I can say this because this is my assumption and you can nod or blink twice, but I'm assuming they're looking for things that would compromise your position when you have access to security clearance information. So if you have things that make you vulnerable out of potentially, let's say extramarital affairs, or you have a gambling addiction that no one knows about but you're there, that someone could then come to you for money, and instead of money get information. Like, I'm assuming anything that makes you a target would they're trying to tease out. Is that somewhat accurate?
Oh, I would say that's definitely accurate. I
Okay.
mean, are you vulnerable?
This
And
is
then
like,
is the organization vulnerable?
yeah,
So
which makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
This
so
is
they have to go into all of those things. So that's actually really important. So yeah, those are just some of the things. And it's like I was reading a couple of other ones. People who are going to go work for the Bank of Canada, or in financials, credit checks are really important on those
yeah.
elements as well.
Yeah, and this is where, once again, there's a theme throughout this whole thing, which is looking for facts. Like, it's objective versus subjective.
Right.
There's so much value in the objective nature of, you could get truth, false, factual information. I'm all for that, because that's going to add just very tangible things. And usually it's not going to affect as much like equitable terms or expectations within a process, right?
Mhm.
Whereas subjectivity, of course it is. Like, I'm going to be biased. If you're asking me, whether Chelsea should be hired, you're my best friend. I obviously like you a lot and think very highly of you, or else you wouldn't be my best friend. So if someone's going to ask me, like, should you hire Chelsea? And I say, fuck yeah, go. She's so amazing. Like, not only is she brilliant, you can trust her. Like, I would ramble about all the things that I see, and they're true, but they're also biased. And so I just think that's
But
where someone could call bullshit on me.
we need to check that a little bit too, because I have actually been in positions where I've been asked about certain people that I am friends with, like, would you hire this person? Would you share their resume around? And I'm like, no, no, I won't actually, but thanks. Like, I have. And because I need to be true to, that's an attestation to my own character and whom I'm supporting. And that's a reflection of me. If I'm willing, like I'm essentially sending things
You
out
know
for
what
someone,
though?
I'm giving a referral. I have to be
But it's
careful.
different in the government, because it's an internal referral versus an external one. Like, if I was asked for, at my time at Shopify, if I was asked by an internal referral, so there's someone, let's say, on the talent team, and someone within operations wants to bring them over, and we're having a conversation. Like, to me, that's very different, because and even if they're friendly, I like this person, I'm gonna be more invested, hopefully, and less political. So more invested in the company, the reason
Mhm.
why we're here. And then there's like the individual and everything else. Whereas when it's external, like if it was a question about, let's say, I'm just going to say a random name, but Sarah internally versus Sarah externally, you're going to have different views of it, because you're not invested in the same end game. Like, I just think that you're going to get more honesty and truth probably when it's under the government hat, because you're working for the same organization, versus, let's say Sarah's
You
going
got
to the
nothing to
private
lose.
sector, you're less
Like,
invested,
sure, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
you know. Also, Sarah's one of our besties, and we would always give a good reference for you.
She is
Shout out
amazing.
Sarah. What?
She is actually amazing though.
I know.
I'll
Well,
tell you that.
closer. You guys work somewhat within the same vicinity.
Yeah, but she is top notch. And the thing is like I like yes, I have actually given Sarah a referral before and left it up to someone else to make that hiring decision, of course, and have nothing to do with that. But she is phenomenal, and I wouldn't refer someone.
Yeah.
I yes, I agree with the internal versus external, but yeah, I mean, I guess you'd have to depend on the situation, but I really
I
do
mean,
try to put myself behind everything that I do, and I'm not saying like I'm the picture of,
no,
values and
I
ethics.
believe you do that, because I know people that you care about personally that you haven't given a professional referral to because you're like, I just don't know. Like they might be amazing, but they might not. It's a personal reference I could give. It's not a professional one.
Either I know and I prefer not to get involved, or I don't know and then I also prefer not to get involved because it's a reflection of you at the end of the day. And I've tried to be very, very careful about who I support in that way, because I know, especially as I move up in the government, your influence becomes
Yeah.
greater. So if I'm going like, oh, I'm this and that, and I think that this person's amazing, and turns out they're actually shit, well, they're like, what is she thinking? What kind of
Yeah.
judgment she got over there saying that this
But see,
person's,
that's when it's internal versus external. Because if it's external, they're never going to come back to you. They won't give a shit. Versus internal, you have more,
yeah,
um, like you have more liability on the road. You know, like you have to actually have influence. You don't know where you're going to go in leadership positions within the government, so you don't want to wreck any roots there.
it's
Where if it's
true.
external, unless you're planning to get hired at that company, nah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
what's
you've
the
got a
moral?
point.
What's the too long didn't listen? TLDL.
TLDL, background checks, great for that basic information that we need, criminal record checks, credit checks,
Yeah.
all those things. Also, but like then I kind of move social media sweeps out of that because that'll give you a lot of information.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily data. Those are like all kinds of data points that are, valuable. Reference checks can be useful, not useful, depends on the way in which they're conducted. Potential for a reframing exercise with reference checks. Massive difference between private and public. Number of candidates qualifying a
Yeah.
candidate versus right fitting a candidate, but can be a good um, determiner for, well, in the government, competencies, but also cultural fit and suitability for a role.
Yeah.
That's too much of a TLDL, but anyways.
Well, listen, guys,
Classic
that
TLDL.
is the episode. So if you're tuning in at the 42 mark, go back, get all the deets around that.
Going at 42 and you're good. You're
You're
essentially good.
good.
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
Shall we
No, I
do
love
wine?
it. Okay. Should we wind it up?
Let's
Talk about your
wine.
hair?
Okay.
Okay. Be right back.
Let's do it.
Woo. And we're back.
When we're back and just the wine floating across the screen.
Chelsea,
Cheers.
what do you got today?
Well, I have wine, hence the wine glass. Okay. And here we go. That's a little bottle. It's called
Vivo. Of
Vivo Reserva. It's a Pinot Grigio. It's
course it
a
is.
Chilean and Canadian blend.
Oh.
Interesting. Yeah. So I likely, as you all know, typical, probably pick this up at the old grocery store, as I do. It's quick and easy. It's a nice wine. I mean, I drank it rather quickly the other day and I felt like I was like a little tipsy. I'm not going to lie. Had a couple of glasses after making dinner and then just like enjoying like a Friday evening. Nice wine. I'd probably give it like a 7 or something. It's like nothing,
There you go. How much was it? Do you remember?
probably like, let's be honest, probably like $12. Like
I was gonna say
maybe,
12.99.
maybe 14,
Oh,
maybe if we're going up like, in the higher range. But yeah, it was nice. So that's what I'm
Chelsea's gonna
doing.
bring the bargain wines in always. I love it.
Well, I always, and it's funny too. Like I drank this the other day. I usually will buy, if there's
A
one I
couple.
haven't had, I'll buy like 2 bottles or something, because then I'll drink it, see if it's any good, and then
That's ballsy
potentially
though, because if you don't like it, you're
I just
pawning that off on the guests when they come.
oh yeah, I just bring it to someone else's house or
Yeah.
serve it to someone else when they come over. So, and like Gary
Okay.
doesn't discriminate in wine; he'll drink anything I open too.
Oh,
So
okay. There you go.
he's
There you go.
he's a victim.
He's a also, I feel like I'm very wildly with my microphone today. Usually it's like always down here. You can't see it. I feel like I'm a singer today or whatever, but I'm liking it. I'll
I
keep
know
it down.
I haven't been using mine because I think it like broke. But
Well,
I
we
am
know it
ordering
broke.
another one. I just can't order it and then be away and then it show up on my door.
Because your big trip's coming up. Okay, before we get into your trip, your hair, I think looks fabulous. I think it
Oh,
looks like circa Jennifer Aniston on Friends.
yeah, but that's like from like a bazillion
She
years
just
ago.
got her hair cut like it again. She
Did
brought it
she?
back.
Okay, well maybe I was onto something.
Yeah.
But I haven't worn my hair like this in a long time. I've actually most often done like the reverse bob situation. But it's funny because I'll cut get I cut Gary's hair, and I've been cutting Gary's hair since we've been together. So like 15, 16 years now. And my mom said, "Oh, I've got like thinning shears." So I was like, "Oh, that would be good because like I'll sometimes cut Chloe's hair, so I do her a nice little style, whatever." And I was like, "Oh, thinning shears."
You got a little aggressive with
Like
your,
I
yeah.
started going nuts. And so you can obviously tell like there's a lot of body up top, which is great, but then it obviously is thinner at the bottom and like flicks out because it's so much thinner. And then I was like, wow, I really took it back to like 2015 or something with this hairstyle right
I
now.
feel like it was more like 2000, but that's why it's coming back because it's been like
I
24 years.
probably
So
still
it's
had
like,
it in 2015. Well, let's be honest. I just kept it going. But yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I
you got to put the thinning shears away because next thing you know, you'll have a mullet again. But I like it right now. I think it looks fab. I wouldn't change it.
it's not bad. I'll get it cut, but like just trimmed a bit so that it's not as like I wouldn't mind if I like killed an inch off of it or something like
Okay.
that. I
Well,
think that
yeah,
would help in the it's a bit much for me. Like
I like
the
it.
amount of hair, I'm telling you, I took a lot of hair off. Like a lot. Even I
I know.
kept
We're all
going and
jealous
going.
of your hair. I have extensions. I have to build hair into my head. You just
Yeah.
have all the hair.
Build hair. You should have seen the garbage can after. Like the kids were like, "What
Jealous.
happened in here?" And I was like,
What did
"You
you
know,
kill?
I just like kind of went to town on the old thinning shears. Like, I don't recommend anyone to cut their own hair. It's not a good idea. You think it's a good idea in the moment. You think you're doing a great job. And afterwards you're like, whoa, I
The amount
probably
of
should.
times I've cut my own bangs. Like,
Yeah,
I think it was Priya's sister's wedding. We were in Toronto, and I cut bangs into my hair that day for a look that night for the wedding. Do you remember that? No. Okay, that's
for
fine.
whose wedding? Your sister's?
No, Priya's sister's wedding.
Oh, Priya's sister's wedding. No, I don't remember you cutting
Oh,
your
yeah.
bangs.
Oh, I
Trying to
did.
think about what you were wearing like
Oh, I
that
don't
night.
remember what I was wearing, but I had like the black under the blonde hair. Well, it was
Yeah,
a
I
look.
remember that. That was a look.
It was
The hair illusion of Brit. Yeah, you've had all different types of hair.
the
Long hair,
purple
short hair,
hair,
purple hair.
braids. I've had
Oh,
everything.
to you.
Now I just go for, the most natural look. This is probably the closest to my natural hair color
Yeah.
and just basic. I feel like I've hit it. I don't need to change it. I just used to like to switch it up. Remember that one time I went to get my hair cut and I was wearing leather pants? The next thing you know, I was bleach white blonde and I had a bob and then I got my nose pierced the next
Oh
day.
my
I
God.
really went through it.
You I do remember that. I remember photos of that. Yeah, you went through a couple of phases for sure with your hair. I mean, I guess we all do. I mean, remember
Yeah.
I had black hair for like a
Yeah.
couple of years. Like I think between the age of like 17, no, it was probably like 16 and like almost 20. Like my hair was
Yeah.
so dark. It was borderline black and it took me 2 years to gradually get it back to a natural color
Yeah. You
and
look so much better blonde.
a lot of processing. Although the other day I was looking at my hair going, "Oh, should I dye it dark again? Like not super dark, but brown."
No, summer's coming. Get it lighter.
I know. But summer's always coming, like
I
and I
know.
think about it like, "Oh, summer's coming, like lighter." I know
You
I
know what we need
probably
to do? Have you seen those color assessments where they do like what are the colors that look best on you? And then I think they also do hair assessment. I think you can do it all through AI and it will tell you like do you have the right tone in hair to complement your skin tone, your eyes, your everything? And then it will tell you what clothes to wear. I actually did the clothes one and I was showing my mom and she's like, I think that's pretty accurate. She's like, those are the colors that I would think look best on you. I'll show you. I wonder if we
is
can.
it just an app? Is it an app?
So those are the colors that look the best on me. And the
Cute.
bottom ones, like supposedly I'm not supposed to wear black, so whatever.
Very
But bright
Mississippi.
yellow, that's a no-go. But all of like the pastels are
Yeah.
what it looks good. And I'm like, you know what? That's accurate.
Well, I mean, like it's good also because you tend to reach for those colors a lot. So like
Yeah, it was
you're
validating.
you're recognizing the colors and the hues that are complementary to you and your skin tone,
Yeah. Well, I
which
guess
is nice. You know
Not
what?
good
Like,
though.
I was looking at your bottom colors there, like a black and you had the yellow, like that bright green one. I'm like really curious. 'Cause remember, I wore that bright green dress at your summer party last year,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and I was
yeah.
really like, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I mean, it looked okay, but like, I would never typically reach for a dress of that
Well, and that's the thing about
light.
this color swatch. It's like, how accurate is it, first of all, but also, is that gonna just like deter, like in a good or bad way, but deter you from wearing things? I don't know.
Like if it ever told me I couldn't wear black, or I don't wear that much beige because it just washes me out, but black
Yeah.
or gray, I'd probably have a meltdown.
Yeah. Well, and it says no black for me, and I'm like, I wear black all the time. I think black is good on everyone. I think that's bullshit. Like, I
Black
think,
always works. I think maybe
yes,
it's just
swimming.
like they were saying, maybe it's not your optimal color.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that bright red and bright yellow, that's not my, I don't wear those colors very often.
But yeah, I mean, who wears bright yellow? I
Yeah.
I I don't think I have any sort of yellow
Just like a
in my
bumblebee.
closet. Right.
Also, side note, I went to this nutritionist, holistic doctor, endocrinologist, and she put me on all these supplements to help with like my Hashimoto's and different things.
What the
And one
hell's
of
a
the things I'm on,
Hashimoto? What's a Hashimoto before you go on? Like what the hell is that?
it's like I'm a little, no, I was gonna make a funny joke about like, the little Kinder surprises or the
Oh my god.
emojis, but no, no, no. It's just a syndrome. It's an autoimmune like disease that goes generally a lot with low thyroid, underactive thyroid, and so it's
Okay.
just how my body processes it, and it's, you can be helped, but it regulates your hormones and your thyroid a lot. And so there's certain things that you can do to help it out, kind of thing. It's probably a bad description, and I'm new to it, so I'll research it more and circle back. But I got put on fish oil. Have you
Oh,
ever done the fish oil pills?
disgusting.
Like, I just smelt it and I'm like, this is actually disgusting. Like, I just like,
You'll
I
burp them
smell it
up.
on my breath.
Yeah, you'll burp them up. Like you think like it's not like the
I didn't
omega
even think I
3
burped ever. And now I'm
and the
like, do I?
what is it? Yeah, fish oil. What are the ones like cod liver oil, like all those ones? I took them for a while. I think when I was pregnant at one point because they recommended them for whatever reason, or I was on a health kick, I can't remember. But like you take it and you're like, okay, well this is fine, but you'll burp it up. Like
Yeah, like
you'll
they're massive pills. Like, so when I first saw it, I was like, I could swallow a horse pill, whatever. Just like,
so
you got to put your water in. This is a trick to anyone who doesn't like pills. Put water in your mouth, put the pill in your mouth, lean forward so the pill floats to the back of your mouth, and then swallow because it just naturally goes down.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Tip and trick. Yeah, I got it from my mom who takes a lot of pills, and I was like, that's excellent. So I don't have any problem taking it down. It's I didn't even think I burped, and now I'm like burping up this fish oil. It's disgusting.
So gross. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally remember doing that too, going, oh, that's not that bad actually. And like, God forbid you accidentally burst it in your mouth or
Oh
something.
my
And
god, that would be, don't even. I would throw up.
I like, it's funny because the only reason why I think that, and they're probably nice of a thick, firm gel around the actual
Yeah, I
fish
don't
oil.
think you could, like, unless you chomp into it,
But
Chelsea.
I'm not even kidding. And sometimes, we get these weird urges. I was taking an Advil liquid gel the other day, or it was like a Kirkland extra strength ibuprofen, but like a liquid gel. And I hate when they do them in like the ball ones as
Yeah,
opposed to like the capsule, like the long skinny ones, because I find
yeah.
those are easy to swallow. But the ball ones, and I don't know why, for some reason, I put it in the back of my mouth and I just gave it a light like squeeze with my mouth,
Only
and
you
it
would
like
do that.
squirted out into my mouth.
No.
I was like, no.
Did it taste bad?
Well, yeah, it was horrible. Like, obviously, it was like full on like the medicine in my mouth, and I
Ugh.
did it's not, like I didn't burst it. It's just like it's like as if there was like a little pinprick at the end, and it just like, psh,
I
and
just
like
picture a water balloon,
so
when like and then it just sprays.
yeah, and that's what it was. And I was like, what the frick? And
You're
then
weird though to bite it. I've never once thought, oh, I wonder what would happen if I just give it a little chomp.
oh, but see, like I do things like that all the time. Well, let's just give this a little test and see how strong the
Ugh.
gel is around the medicine. Yeah. Anyways, all that to say, it was a bad move on my part. And now I struggle every time I need to take one of these flippin' liquid gels because I think I'm
We'll
gonna.
get the other ones, the proper shape, and then. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I would have thought they were, but I hate when they make them round because they're also
I
just
know
hard
it
to
really can
swallow.
hurt.
Yeah, it sucks.
Try my trick.
Now I have the new trick. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna because Chloe's trying to learn how to take little pills here and there too, like in terms of low gravels. If I don't have a kid's gravel or whatever, they're so tiny. They're so tiny and
You
little.
just
She's
gotta lean forward.
so now I'm gonna
Will
just
help. And
I'll
on
show
that, we'll wrap this up because we've been
okay.
chatting for a bit on pill swallowing. Riveting TV here.
Riveting TV. We hope. Well, hey, they've gotten the
Tips on how
whole
to swallow
tips on how to swallow pills. They've learned all about our hair.
and color matching your skin tone.
AI and color matching your skin tone and choosing your next hairdo or hair color. So there.
Yeah, we should AI and see what the best hairdos is, and then like attach it, and then get people to vote.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Because doesn't it show up like four different types or
I
whatever?
think
Like
so. We got to research the proper
I've
tool, but I
seen
think
somebody
so.
do that. Oh, we should totally do it. Let's do a vote on our next hairdo. Imagine and then there's a vote and then do we have to follow through?
Everyone hates our current look. Imagine.
Current look. Disgusting. Like you need a fresh look. Oh, I
Oh,
don't know if I
sad.
can commit to that though.
Okay, well, we'll keep you posted, folks. We might.
We'll
And with
stop it.
that,
Stop it here for you
cheers.
guys.
Love you.
Love ya.